the crash. And for more, let's speak now with Matt Driskill. He is editor at Aviation Magazine, and he joins us live from here in Singapore. Matt, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Now, the US FAA says it grounded the MAX jets based on new evidence it found on the ground, and we're talking about similarities in the flight path between Sunday's crash and the one in Indonesia. Could you elaborate on this new data?
Well, the new data that they were talking about was more refined satellite data where they were able to trace the flight path or the vertical flight path of the Ethiopia jet, which, according to the FAA and to other authorities, was similar in nature to the problems that the Lion Air flight encountered. And those problems in the Lion Air case were attributed to the MCAS system, which is sort of the anti-stall system, which has really been at the center of this whole brouhaha, this whole problem with Boeing and the new 737 MAX, because pilots have complained in the U.S. and elsewhere that they were not really trained properly on the new system. They also say that the information was not contained in the flight manuals. So Boeing's got a huge problem on its hand right now. It's already cost them billions of dollars, and the longer it drags on, it's going to cost them billions more.
Right, and the black boxes are set to arrive in Paris today. So how much of this new information will help with the ongoing investigation?
Well, obviously, that's the key thing, and the faster, I'm sure Boeing is pushing for that information to be downloaded as quickly as possible. Because the longer this lasts, the more money it's going to cost them, the more money it's going to cost the airlines, and the airlines are going to come back to Boeing and start looking for compensation. So, you know, the problem is downloading that information. It depends on how damaged the flight recorders were. Some of the reports, the early reports, the initial reports that I read, said that there was some damage to the recorders, which of course would be normal when you have an air crash like that. So it just depends on how quickly they can get that information out and how quickly they can release a preliminary report.
And we also know that the United States also grounded a larger version of the plane, the MAX 9. Do we know what's the reason behind this?
I think it's an overabundance of caution, because the MAX 9 is the flight software, and all of those things are very common. And that's the thing, that was one of the key selling points that Boeing, at every air show from Singapore to Farnborough to Paris and everywhere in between, one of the things that they were stressing was that you could take a pilot who was flying what they called the 737 NG, or new generation, and transition them into a 737 MAX, whether it's a MAX 8 or a MAX 9 or the planned MAX 200. You could transition them into that new plane in a matter of days with just a 2-day training course, because they wanted the systems to be common between the models. And that was one of their key selling points. The problem is, at least according to the pilots that have filed some of the complaints and some of the reports that I've seen, they may have cut a few corners when it comes to telling everybody what the new software was about and including that information in the flight manual.
And this grounding, it appears to remain in effect indefinitely. So how will this affect airports around the world and flight schedules and passengers as well? It actually affected me personally. I was flying back from Cebu on Tuesday and was flying on Silk Air, and had tried to reach the airline earlier in the day before I went to the airport to check in, because I was scheduled to leave on a MAX 8, and never heard back from the airline. But when I got to the airport and checked in, and this was after China had grounded all the MAXs, all the 737s, they told me, no, you're going to be flying on an A320. So they substituted an Airbus plane. Right now, there's only about 376 of the MAX models in operation that have been delivered. So, you know, today, tomorrow, the disruption may not be that serious, but the longer it goes on, then yeah, it's going to be a problem, because some airlines don't have that many airplanes in inventory that they can readily substitute. Silkair can do that because they can count on Singapore to help them out if they need a bigger plane to make up the difference, and if they have to cancel a flight or something like that. But there's a lot of airlines that don't have, you don't have a lot of spare airplanes just hanging around that you can throw at the problem. And so that's a problem for the airlines. But again, keep in mind that there's about 24,000 some odd planes in the global fleet, and the MAXs make up 376 at the moment. The problem is not so much for the airlines. They can probably scrape around and find another airplane. The problem is going to be for Boeing the longer this lasts, because Boeing there are 5,111 MAXs on order, and that they're going to take a huge hit if they can't start delivering those planes.
Yeah, and Boeing should be concerned. I mean, despite all of these suspensions, it still insists that it has confidence in the planes. Should we be concerned?
Yes and no. If the investigation shows that Boeing cut corners by not providing the proper information for pilots, and that U.S. regulators allowed them to do that, then absolutely I'd be worried. Having said that, Boeing's been building planes for a long time. They build a good product. Airbus also builds a good product. The A320 is the competitor to the 737, and it's a good plane. So they do good work, but again, if the investigation shows that Boeing should have done this software differently, the anti-stall software, or if they shows that they should have included more information for the pilots, then that's a big problem. And yeah, you should be worried. Having said that, traveling by air is still the safest way to travel in the world. I mean, something like 4.5 or 4.8 billion people last year flew on a plane. There were 40 some odd million flights in 2018, and it's still the safest way to travel.
All right, Matt, thanks very much for speaking with us. We were speaking there with Matt Driskill. He is live here in Singapore. He is the editor at Asian Aviation Magazine.